Hey there. Hi. Welcome to my dyslexic life. And here we are, man. It has been a ride, right? And so last episode, I told you guys a little bit about my first memory. The honest truth is, I don't remember which one. Well, I think that was my first memory because I think I was a little older in this one, but they're just memories. I don't know which one was first, in all reality. But they're two of my first memories. So last episode was one. This is going to be another one, and it's just a an interesting ride. So it's what it is. So my dyslexic life. Love for you guys to subscribe. Please do. Please subscribe. Please be a part of this. Please get into these stories and check them out. I know you're going to enjoy them. We have had a ton of positive, positive reactions to this, and it just kind of helps people through their day, man, through life. And even if you don't know someone who's dyslexic, these are great stories of just overcoming something, anything. And really, what we want to do is inspire. That's what we want to do. We want to inspire you to hit your next day stronger than the last, and so that's what this is about. And if you do know someone who's dyslexic, or if you are and you know those struggles on top of it, it's going to hit home. It really is. So my dyslexic life is the name of the podcast, and here we go. So it was my grandmother's birthday, and they had a beautiful home in Poake on an acre of land, and it was their dream home, right? They had worked hard, and they had bought this home, and they had been fixing it up and doing different things, and I kind of come from a family of hustlers. Like, going out and just getting a job, working the job, building a career that way wasn't really the way that most of my family did it. Like, for example, my great grandfather, Francisco Urrea, he came to the U.S. from Spain on a boat, and he became a successful sheep herder, right? So in the northeast heights of Albuquerque, which now are homes until you get to the Elena Gallegos area and to those foothills, is where his sheep would wander and they would graze, and him and my grandmother and her brother and sisters would go out there and help, right? And so my grandmother, talk about a tough woman, and her sisters, and they would actually go hunting rattlesnakes out there, and they would kill the rattlesnakes because they were bad for the sheep, right? And so I know we think a little differently these days, but those days it was about surviving, and those sheep are what they needed to survive. So they did that, and they made wine. And so this was during the Depression. So they really did need these things to survive because there weren't a lot of commodities. There weren't a lot of things. You couldn't just go to the store and buy. You'd get, what she'd say, they get tickets or whatever they get, coupons, and then they could go buy stuff with that. Because the value of money, the dollar was in a bad place. So during the recession, they lived well because they had assets that they could use in trade with other families, and they could help other families. And those assets were wine and the sheep, right? And the sheep, that's quite an asset because you have wool, you have the meat, right? And you can even milk the animal if you need to. So, so that's what they had, and so that's how they lived their life. So my grandmother then took that work ethic and that character and applied that to life, right? And so then she started to teach her children. The problem with that is that her children ended up falling victim to drug use, to addiction, and led violent and difficult lives, right? My mom, my uncle, my dad, who wasn't their child, but he was a part of the problem at that time, the epidemic at that time. And so they were working together to start a catering company. So during my grandmother's birthday, where all these people were there, my uncle was working on the butane stove that they were going to use for their catering company because they were going to start doing that. And he's working on it, and everybody's hanging out, and we're all having a great time. You know, it's my grandmother's birthday. It's a great day. And my grandmother comes to me and my cousin Danny. She's 2 months younger than me, so we're about the same age. We're playing constantly. She says, "Hey guys, I'm gonna send you outside so you can play in the new sandbox that we made for you guys." And so they had put some sand out there and they had framed it off with some wood, and we're gonna go play in our sandbox. And she said, "But first," and she took us to a closet by the front door. She had two cool little buckets, and in those buckets were little shovels and a little rake, and it was just these cool little toys. And you've seen them before at a Walgreens or Walmart or any of that, like Target, right? Like these little toys. And not very expensive, but if you have a place to play with them, you have some sand, you're going to have a blast, especially at our age. We were just babies, really. So we went out there and we're playing, and I remember I'm moving the dirt around and stuff like that. And I hear my uncle scream. I was a ways away, so he screamed loud, and he screamed everybody out of the house. And he said it over and over and over again. Everybody out of the house, everybody out of the house, everybody out of the house. And I'm looking at that and I'm wondering why, right? And I have no idea. And so I look up, and out the side door, people start running, and out the front door, people start running. And I'm looking, and all of a sudden, boom, there's this explosion. And this explosion is like, I've never heard anything this loud. It jolted my chest. It hit me. And the people are running out, and my uncle's running out, and he gets about halfway out, and you see a panic on his face, and he realizes that his son, my youngest cousin, Juju, who was a baby at the time, is still in the house. And he stops, and he turns around, and he runs right back in the door that he's coming out. Now, as he's running in this door, my dad is running out the back, and he has Juju. So he had remembered, and he ran and grabbed him from a back bedroom and was running out as my uncle's running in. But my uncle doesn't see him, and he doesn't see my uncle. I can see the whole thing. I can see the whole thing happening. My dad runs out. My uncle runs in. Right as my uncle runs in, there's a second explosion. I see my uncle fly through the air. He's on fire. He's flying through the air, and he hits a wall there. And we had an arroyo there, or a little irrigation ditch. He falls into the irrigation ditch, and he's on fire. At this point, my dad sees this. People point it out. My dad hands off the baby. I don't know who to, but he hands Juju off. And he runs towards my uncle. My uncle stands up, and his skin is hanging off of his body like leather fringe gloves that you'll see in a rodeo, or like the jackets with the leather fringe. It was terrifying. The entire house is in flames. Smoke, fire, noise, it's raging. My grandmother's eyes are full of blood. My aunt's eyes are full of blood because the glass had broken. When the explosion happened, they got glass in their eyes. It was absolutely terrifying. My dad approaches my uncle, grabs him, and throws him on the ground and starts rolling him to try to get the flames to turn off. He was on fire. And as he's doing that, my uncle's turning with him, and my dad's turning him, and then my uncle stands up and starts running, and he's still on fire. Me and my cousin are still in the sandbox, and he's running towards us. He's screaming. My dad's running right behind him. And he dives into the sand where we're sitting. My dad comes behind him and gets the sand and starts to cover him with it to put out the flames. And then it's blank. And then I'm standing there, holding my grandfather's hand, looking at the house. There's no more flames. There's just black windows and smoke. And I don't think I had said a word up to that point. I just remember shaking. And I look around and my cousin's not there anymore. And I'm holding my grandfather's hand, and there's a helicopter, and the helicopter blade is turning slowly. My grandfather wasn't there. My grandfather was lieutenant governor at that time, but they had flown him in once they heard this had happened. And so I'm holding his hand, and I look up at him, and he looks down at me, and I tell him, "Why are the windows black, Pa?" And he tells me, "Hito, there are no windows." And that's what I remember. I can think of little details. Like, I remember the roof coming off. When it exploded, the roof literally lifted off the entire house and then fell back down. It was It was just surreal. I mean, it was really surreal what had happened that day. My grandmother wasn't there anymore. My mom, my aunt, they had all been rushed off to the hospital. My grandmother, even though she was bleeding from where I stayed with her son, obviously, and they got him to the hospital, and so they started doing what they could to save him, to save his life, right? I mean, he had been burnt so badly that really everybody said there is no way he's going to live. And so they got him to a point where he was pretty much stable. What happens with burn victims is you can stabilize them, but at some point they may get an infection. So the doctor had told her, "Listen, chances of infection are high. And on top of that, if he does survive, he's going to be very scarred. There's going to be issues. We don't know if he'll be able to see. It's going to be a hard life. That's what's going to happen." My grandmother said, "Well, we're here for him. Whatever it is, we're here." Now, remember the kind of woman my grandmother was. Like, this woman is the epitome of strength. She doesn't turn her back. She doesn't give up. Nothing. She could have everything tomorrow, nothing today, and she wouldn't stop. She would continue and have everything again. It's the way she's built. And so in that moment, she made a choice. And she said, "No, my son's going to live, and he's going to live well. That's what it is." And so we were living in a hotel at that time, in a cheap hotel, and just doing our best to survive. And so she would figure it out. And I don't know how she did it, but she would make him plates with a ton of fat. She would bring crab legs. She would bring him avocado. She would be whatever she could do, or however she could figure out a way to bring things with fats, carbs, anything that would put weight on him, anything that had a big calorie intake to it. She didn't let him eat the food at the hospital. She'd bring him food, and she'd be there with him day in, day out. And little by little, he started to heal. One day, my mom and my grandmother and my aunt, my uncle's wife at the time, they're all walking through the hospital, and a doctor walks out of his room and stops and looks at them and shakes his head and walks away. And they're like, it's a big gulp, right? Like, "Oh my God, what happened?" And so they run into the room because they think something happened. And my uncle's standing there naked with a razor, shaving the excess skin off of his own body. And the nurse looks at them and says, "He won't let us do it." And he says, "No, I'm doing it myself." And my grandmother said that was the day she knew he was going to survive and it was going to be okay. And he did. He died later of cancer, many years later. Lived a great life. But he lived a great life with very minimal scarring, healthy, happy life, That was not his last hurrah. And my grandmother was then inspired. And so she said, "You know what? We're going to build this again. We're going to start again." And she decided to start a restaurant. Now, she didn't have any investor friends. She didn't have a family with money. She didn't have money herself at this point. They had just lost the house that they were buying, and the insurance was not trying to hear it and wasn't helping. That was a commercial stove. It should have never been in the house. They ended up having to sue the insurance company, sue the butane tank company. I mean, there's all these things just to try to get the life back to normal. And so my grandmother said, "I can't wait on any of that. I got to do something myself." And she started talking to people, and found out that there was a vacant building, a vacant restaurant in the Santa Fe airport. Now, at that time, the Santa Fe airport was probably half an hour from Santa Fe. This was not an ideal place to open a restaurant, but it was the opportunity she had. So she talked to them, and without a penny, she got a lease. Then she started talking to food providers, just the best, Bueno Foods. And she was able to get them to commit to giving her food, some stock, in advance. She went to Coca-Cola, she went to Pepsi. She was able to talk one of them into putting in a machine, and she started her business. Without a penny, she started a restaurant at the airport. She would talk to people, she'd get people there. Before you know it, that restaurant was busy. It was booming. It was booming. I remember I loved Pedrito Fernandez, and so I would sit there listening to his record at the bar of the restaurant, and I would sing the songs. People would come and listen to me, and it's kind of what sparked me on my music, right? So she did it. Then after that, she was able to save a little money. She got a beer and wine license. That was that. She had her business, and she had goals, and she made those goals. From there, she moved to Agua Fria Road, and she had made a restaurant there, and that was successful. And then from there, she moved even closer. She moved to Cerrillos Road, and she did that restaurant, and that did even better. And then from there, she moved to her dream, which was right downtown Plaza, Santa Fe, and she had a Maria Isabel's right near the Hilton on West Water Street. Beautiful, beautiful portal, beautiful area and patio in the area, patio in the back. She built this, started without a penny, and was inspired by this tragedy. I'm very proud of that, very proud of her, and proud of my uncle for getting through what he got through. And that is that memory. That is that second memory. But, I like talking about that time because I like to remind people that anything can happen in life, and you can have everything today and nothing tomorrow. But that doesn't mean you can't have everything again. And maybe it's a different everything, and maybe it goes in a whole different direction. Maybe things change. Maybe it inspires new ideas. But giving up should never be the answer. The longer you give up for, the more you keep yourself from what you deserve, the more you keep yourself from that next step. It didn't take her any time to decide to make that next move. And a lot of it was based on necessity. We needed to make money. She needed to make money. She had an idea and she took it on herself. She didn't wait for anyone. She didn't wait on my grandfather. She didn't wait on insurance. She didn't wait on lawsuits. She went for it, and she did it, and she kept doing it. My grandmother's been featured in Sunset Magazine. She's been featured on New York Times. She cooked for Joan London, her carne adobada. She made her carne adobada plate on Good Morning America. This is a woman who had probably an 8th grade education. Anything's possible. Things were different then. They're different now. Opportunities existed then that don't exist now, but guess what? We have a whole bunch of things that exist today. So, if you want to do something, find a way. Figure it out. Do it. If you have a need to do it, do it. If you just want to do it, do it. Don't wait. That's the lesson that I learned from my grandmother's house exploding, literally exploding. Their entire life exploded. Anyways, My Dyslexic Life. This is the podcast. And we are also on YouTube. And so if you are enjoying this, please subscribe. Please do that. We want to reach out to you. We want to hear from you. We want to communicate with you. We're super excited. We're doing a lot of things and just really enjoying this opportunity, right? Like technology and the ability to create content in the world today is just not what it was at any other time. And that is the blessing right now. Like, man, if you're thinking about it, take advantage and let me know what you're thinking about. Like, what are you going to do? What's your step? This is mine right now. And it came from, I was born in COVID. Isolate and create. That was my motto, and this is where this came from. My friend, Jeff Overly, he's the one that came up with isolate and create, man. And we got to it. I got to it. Started painting again and making these recordings, and started a whole other business, and just have had a lot of blessings. And then we made a move. We're out here in Texas now. We're in Dallas, right downtown Dallas right now, in this beautiful loft. Just living life, man. And things are great. And when I say we, I mean me and my kids. Super blessed. But we want to share with you. We want to continue to share with you. So please subscribe and just give us the opportunity to continue here. We really appreciate it. And yeah, My Dyslexic Life.